Hi, I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Magazine, and this is another episode of WCM's Connections. And I'm excited to have a guest on today that I've known for a number of years. I can't remember exactly when I first met Greg Emmert, but I know he was working at a park. And now he's the founder of Vireo, which is a consulting agency for the industry. I guess, what else do you do, Greg, at Vireo?
Yeah, that's it, man. Consulting for outdoor hospitality. So I can help people sort of refine and improve their operations. I can build feasibility studies for people who want to build from the
Yeah.
ground up. Market data analysis, due diligence is a big thing that we lean into. When I say we, it's just me and my imaginary friend. We're a boutique consulting firm. And it is when you get Vireo, you get Greg. And that's actually kind of part of my value prop, right? You're not going to get a team of people who you're going to get new people all the time. And that has its advantages. When you get Vireo, you get me, you get one-on-one with the founder. So
Yeah.
we do due diligence as well, go on site, evaluate the assets, set up inspections, and kind of review that with the buyer. And we can do it from the flip side too. We can help a seller prepare their park for that sale to get the best value they can from it.
Yeah, and I think one of the more interesting things is obviously people will see Vireo, the bird on there. I think you're one of the only birders I know. So that's a passion of yours. You go around the world looking for birds, right?
Yeah. I've been
Yeah.
to Central America a couple of times, South America, Panama, Honduras, and Colombia so far, and hope to add a lot more countries to that, as well as the United States, of course. But I'm surprised I bet I'm not, I bet you have some closeted birder friends because there are more birders in the United States than there are golfers. We outnumber them, if you can imagine that.
Well, I guess, I mean, I don't know. Is there like were you always, I guess we can call them bird nerds, whatever you want to.
Yeah,
Were you
absolutely.
always into birding, or did you get to a certain age and you were like, wow, I like these feathered creatures, I guess?
So I was very fortunate to have parents who spent time in the outdoors and let me do all
Okay.
the things that I feel like all kids should be able to do, like get dirty and turn over rocks and learn, right? By putting your hands into soil and water and they took me camping and fishing and later on I got into hunting and basically all
Yeah.
forms of outdoor activity and conservation. And when I was about 8 years old, I've got a really nerdy uncle who took me birding for the first time. And tough to get an 8-year-old to focus on anything, right? But I can vividly remember seeing a rose-breasted grosbeak and like having my mind was blown. I didn't know these things were they nest in Ohio there and if anybody who's listening right now, if you don't know what that looks like, you should go Google it and your mind will be sufficiently blown as well. They are absolutely stunningly beautiful birds, and that was it. That was my, as birders call it, that was my hook bird, and that got me in, and the rest is history. And now I'll nerd out on birds, dragonflies, flowers, trees, grasses, bugs. That birds were my gateway drug for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think I watched a movie once where I didn't realize how into birding people could get until I forget what the name of the movie was, but there's a movie where the guy's chasing down like his bird list of birds that he
The
needs
Big
to.
Year, probably with Jack
Ye
Black and Owen Wilson.
Probably, yeah,
So Jack
and
Black's character is an Ohioan, Greg Miller, and I birded with him last spring. Greg is
oh,
very popular in Ohio birding circles and happened to be on a trail with me once. So, yeah, so that Jack Black character, I got to bird alongside him.
well, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just amazing to learn what people are really into, and birding's definitely a good activity. Are you ever gonna see all the birds, every bird in North America, I guess?
absolutely not.
We'll
I would love to go for it, but I'm not. There's a very serious distinction between birders and listers. And while I do have a life list, a loose one, I don't know exactly how many birds are on it. I don't chase birds to put them on the list. I want to see new species, but it's not about putting a check mark on and on to the next. So I would
Yeah.
love to see them all, but it's tough. There's over 900 species in all of North America. But then you go to a country like Colombia, and that's the birdiest country in the world. It's roughly the size of Texas, and maybe a couple other states added to it, and it's got over 1,800 species in a landmass that small. It's so in North America, probably not. In the world, definitely not. But I'm gonna get as many as I can.
Well, that's awesome. And of course, that's not really why we brought you on the show. We don't really do a birding podcast. I only know of a few species of birds, like robins, which I believe is the state bird for Michigan, where I live. But we brought you on to talk more about the parks industry. I guess I met you a while ago. You had been working at your parents' park. You were managing it, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Yep.
And you guys used to own a Campgrounds of America, but they sold it a few years ago, and then you moved into consulting business. I guess I kind of wanted to explore a little bit of your backstory. Um, how long did your parents own the park before they
So
sold?
we all three were owners, and they
Yeah.
purchased it. My share was very small, and then over the 26 years from 94 to 2020 when we sold, um, my role increased, my share of ownership increased. I'm very proud to say that I was the majority shareholder by the time we sold it. I kept working my
Well,
way
that's
through
awesome.
there, and that took a lot. Anybody who's out there and has a family owned and operated park, boy, I envy the ones that I speak to sometimes in my work that seem to just have a really good relationship, understand lanes and roles and responsibilities, stay out of each other's way, work towards a common goal. We did not have that. We we spent a lot of time button heads, and at times we were very oil and water. But we're family. Those kind of things just they caused us to grow and think differently, and it shaped our perspectives. And while sometimes we fought against one another and where we thought we should head, we
Yeah.
always stuck together and we saw it through to the end. Selling in 2020, which was a little bit of a surprise, but not so much. My parents were getting up there in age. They had had some health things going on.
Uh-huh.
Like a lot of folks, they didn't take back out of the property much over time. So it was like, okay, well, if they're going to have a proper retirement, we're going to need to sell the asset. And it was bittersweet. It was sad to see the land go, but at the same time, I think we were all, after that much time, we were ready for change from the business perspective. Like I think it had worn us down a bit. Um, and it was just time. And then, COVID. We sold December 20th of 2020. So we're all for the signing, like everybody's got masks on and we're sitting around a table and like trying to sign sterilizing pen. We
Yep.
each had our own pens so they were that we weren't passing germs back and forth. Like that alone was crazy. Getting through that COVID year, as anybody who was in the industry through that time knows, it felt the sale felt like a huge weight was lifted. So it was
Yeah.
good. And I haven't looked back. It's been great getting into consulting.
Yeah, I guess, just to step back a little bit further, I think you, in our previous conversations, you had mentioned, you were around 1920 when your
Yeah.
parents bought the park.
Yeah.
Well, you guys bought the park because you were part owner too. I guess, why did they wake up one morning and decide, we want to own an RV park? What did they do beforehand that kind of pointed them in this direction, I guess?
So my parents were both they came from really tough backgrounds. They met in the housing project where they lived in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
My mom was the child of immigrant parents who had come here. My grandfather from Turkey and her mom from Italy. My dad was the son of he was one of five and was the son of deaf parents. Um,
Okay. Wow.
he lived for the first few years of his life, lived in a tar paper shack on some gravel road in East Tennessee, not too far from where the Smoky Mountains are. And their parents came to Ohio. They met as kids in this housing project and just worked their tails off to make their lives. My dad was a machinist. My mom was a receptionist in the United Steelworkers Union, and always loved the outdoors. Always took us camping, as I said earlier. And but the my dad always wanted to, he just had this drive. I want to do better tomorrow than I'm doing today. And I want to do a little bit better the next day and a little bit better the next day. And he always worked so hard at that. And he also, though, suffered from a very, I don't know if it's an American thing or if we all humans do it, but he was an armchair quarterback. Really, really. So we had an RV. We camped seasonally at a
Yeah.
park not too far from the one they ended up buying. But when we weren't traveling, it just stayed on site. We went out there, and every weekend he would look at those owners and be like, "We can do this. We can do this. We should see if we
Yep.
can do this." And just got the idea in his head. We were going to buy a campground and found one, got it under contract, sold our house, went like all in, took all his retirement money, invested it in the park, and we moved out there and got going and learned in probably the first 24 to 48 hours that we had no idea what we were doing. Being a camper does not qualify you, much like watching Patrick Mahomes does not qualify you to throw a pass. Yeah, it was a hell of a journey. But it was great. I mean, we learned, you learn to be self-reliant and so many different skills. And yeah, no regrets, but those first few years they were tough while we tried to learn
I have to
everything that a
yeah,
park owner needs.
I have to imagine, like, every park owner has that experience at one time, even, like, the ones who have
Yeah.
been in the industry. There's some families that have been in the industry for a long time, but I have to imagine the very first relative who opened that park decades ago had to go through that journey, and maybe the family is learning from that experience, and the established business, it might be a little easier to operate. But I have to imagine everybody has that journey at some point. I know when I go to conferences, people like to point at the newbies and be like, "Oh, you don't know what's coming." So, they've
Yep.
went through some experiences themselves too, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to agree. The realization was that we now owned and operated and were responsible for a small city,
Yeah.
and none of us had ever run a city before. So it was quite the journey. But again, I love to learn. I'll be a lifelong learner. I mean, there's no way it'll stop for me because it really drives me. That's one of the things I enjoy about consulting is every time you meet a new client and see their challenges, it's like, oh, I see similarities for sure. There's similarities across all of this, but the individual little nuanced things that you learn about the operations and the business and the industry itself, it's fantastic. So that was the plus side while we were, pulling out our hair, which I might have done a little too much of that up front here. I'm sort of paying for that now. While we were pulling out our hair, we were learning like crazy. So
Yeah. And I think, what's one of the other interesting things is, like, from where you guys are coming from is how did you guys figure out the roles? I know I've spoken with a lot of park owners who are like, we realized, like, once we open the park, this person shouldn't be around the customers. They're more on the maintenance side. Maybe that family member is more of a maintenance person. They can't deal with the customers. I guess, did you guys have to explore what roles you guys were best at? Were you guys all good with the customers, or did you realize, well, maybe dad shouldn't be shouldn't be doing the customer service role?
we definitely did. And that took a really long time. And I will say, even at the end,
Yeah,
probably those last 7 or 8 years, the last 12 or so years, I really had the reins. It
yeah,
was my operation. But I have to tell you, even if you're majority and even if you have the role, when the other two people that are on the payroll or have a say, if their titles are mom and dad, at least in my family, yeah, all that stuff's out the window. They're
yeah.
going to do what they want when they want. It was it was difficult. That was probably our one of our most trying things is especially the two of them, and they would say especially him. So I'll take that. We did a lot of crossover and shouldn't have, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy helping people with now because setting those up and sticking to that, it makes such a difference. Your stress level drops, but you have to have that trust in the other folks. And I think they didn't matter how old or experienced I was still their baby, right? I got two older
Yeah.
brothers. I was just the kid. My performance almost didn't matter. It's like, well, we can, he's just the kid. So, and I love him dearly, but we stepped on each other a lot. But did finally, probably those last 7 or 8 years, finally got it under control where it's like, they trusted me that I have this stuff. They would come and try to cross into the lane, and I'd have to. It was more like a NASCAR race, but I could sort of
Yeah.
bump them on the curve and send them back into their lane, and they would bump me and maybe keep me back in mine. Um, but it did take a while. We had plenty of service failures related to people being at the desk that probably shouldn't have been at the desk when they were at the desk. Easy to laugh about it now, but it was stressful when it was going on.
Yeah, and I think one of the other interesting things when I talk about when we talk to families who have kind of gotten into the business with the older and the younger generations is the um, idea about like how things are going to progress, the 5 or 10 year plans at the park. Obviously, sometimes the younger generations have different ideas on what needs to be the focus up front versus maybe the older. Did you guys have some of that? Like when you bought the park, was there certain things that you were like, well, we need to focus on this first? Or did you guys differ on some of that stuff? How do you work that out, I guess?
That's one of the places where they bought a park that it was definitely a value add park. Let's just say that, right? It,
Yeah.
it needed a lot of help. It had
Yep.
been sort of band-aided together, and the previous owners, there was a couple, a family who had built it, a family who had bought it and had it for, I forget how many years before we bought it, but their approach to infrastructure and taking on new campers and expanding the park was, if they had at the time 110 sites and they got 10 families that came in and said, we want to join you for next year, those areas over there in the trees kind of look cool. Would you put sites in for us? Sure. And they would tap into the electricity and take it over there. And they would put, there was, when we bought it, there would be, if there were 10 sites, there was a central telephone pole, and there would just be outlets all over it, like little 20 amp outlets all over it, and coming one box with maybe, 4 or 5 20 amp breakers in it. But then there's like 20 outlets. And it was it was a mess. So it was, that part was actually kind of easy for us because we knew, okay, well, we typically have 2 or 3 electrical fires a year. That's probably a really good place to start investing in the infrastructure. So we started we went to the worst parts of the park, started putting that infrastructure underground, put in our first fit. There were no 50 amp sites when we bought it. There were no metered sites. This was 94. There weren't even, I can remember in 95 when we got our first 35-foot travel trailer in, and it felt, oh my, look at this behemoth,
Yeah. Yep.
right? And then, that grew to 50 amp sites. And so that part was actually pretty easy because of the type of park that we bought. There was a lot of, the previous owners had let them build whole structures over and around their campers that were then falling apart. And we had a lot of those things that we had to sort of clear out over time. A lot of those guests left fairly early on and they just abandoned those trailers. So we had to learn how to take care of that. And actually, my dad was one of 4 owners that um, got a process set up through the state legislature because it was very loose at the time. But he and 4 other owners from right around here in Medina County built this process based on the laws that were on the books but weren't being enforced, went to our legislator and got it passed through as a bill through the state house. And now that process sits with the Ohio Campground Owners Association as a way to
Wow.
get rid of abandoned trailers. Because if you've got an abandoned trailer, that's got a title. You can't just take it and like chuck it in a
Yep.
dumpster. It belongs to someone. So um, yeah, they got that. That's one of my dad still has that picture, sits very prominently in his living room. It's him and Bob Romaine, Ray Pierce, and the late Joe Carino from Honeydew Campground standing behind Representative Batchelder as they got that signed. And that was a pretty proud moment because it helped not just us, but the industry as a whole here in Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, we go to these conferences and we run into these older people, they're getting up there now, and, just the
Careful what you
foundation.
say, Ben. Careful what you say.
The fo older than us. So the foundation of, for the entire industry, and even what glamping is doing right now, I mean, you just couldn't do, any of this without the foundation that they laid,
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years ago. What used to be the National Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds, just the progress they made on their end, and then all these state associations, it's just incredible. When you hear these stories like what your dad went through there. So that's awesome. I guess when you bought the park, was it in the Campgrounds of America system already, or did you guys transition into it?
No, that was when I got the reins. It was something that I had thought about for a long
Yeah.
time. We almost sold it in 2007
Okay.
to Travel Resorts of America, and anybody who's a member of OHI will know the name Robert Bose. Robert is a part of that
Yeah.
organization, and we were under contract. He brought me and said, would you like to stay and manage it? And I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to need a job if I sell this place. So sure, yeah, of course, I'd want to stay and manage it. So I started kind of shadowing Robert. He took me to what at the time was the Arvik conference. It was in Vegas. I met all their other
Yeah.
managers, and he had been with KOA previously, and he started talking to me about what KOA can do for a property, and that got my wheels turning. And then when that sale fell through, um, I went to the School of Management in Wheeling
Yeah.
at the Ogle Bay Resort.
Yeah.
Met Larry Brownfield there, and the rest was history. That guy got his hooks into me, and he finished me off. But it was something that I've been thinking about for a while. Like we're one of those parks that we were a destination park. There's no draw around us, but we had good population centers nearby. We were within a 45-minute drive of Cleveland and Akron, and then about a 90-minute drive of Columbus. So three good-sized metro areas to draw from, but we needed to provide the entertainment, the activities, which we were kind of already doing. I started expanding that, but then I looked at, okay, what could they bring us? Now we were a heavily seasonal park. Those parks don't always make the best on the owner's side to pay a royalty from a season camper's
Yeah.
site fees is tough because
Yep.
they're not really paying you. It's a great value for them. It's still good for your cash flow, right? But you're not making a ton on that like you might on an overnight site if you have a high occupancy rate. But it's still financially it made sense. So I converted us in that would have been 2012. And so we spent our last wow, can that be right? 2012, we spent our last 8 going on 9 years as a KOA. So we operated both as a franchise park and also outside the franchise system. It gives me a really unique perspective when I talk to my clients.
Yeah. And you were a rock star at those Campground of America conventions. I remember you were a huge deal. Oh, there's Greg.
I think you might be inflating that, but I'm going to take that. I would like to be I never felt that way for sure. However, I will say my NPS scores were always like, oh, I don't know, high 70s. We topped out one year at like 84, I think. I felt really
Yeah.
good about that. Yeah, and we had a park that it was not super modern, it was not, but we went over the top with our hospitality
Yeah.
and with our guest services. And man, if you do that, people do not notice. I drive through the park and I'm like, oh God, that over there, and that thing's driving me nuts, and I got to get this fixed. I hope nobody notices it. They don't notice that stuff. That's the owner's lens, right?
Yeah.
The customer doesn't see that, especially if the whole time you're making them feel so comfortable and welcome and
Yep.
appreciated, all of that goes out the window, and they're just thinking about when they can come back down and make another, when they can, what, as we're driving out, let's make another reservation to come back in a couple of weeks. And we had a lot of that. And that I yeah, I probably would dislocate my shoulder if I went on too much longer because I would pat myself. And that was all me, man. I was really, really heavy into that.
Well,
And
that's
because I
awesome.
knew this is our cheat code. This is how we're gonna get beyond not having splash pads and really high end amenities. And it did, it worked.
You mentioned Larry Brownfield. I'll tell you what, if you don't want to own a KOA, you don't want to talk to Larry Brownfield.
Don't get
So
near him. Don't
he,
get near him.
he will sell
He's
you on a great guy.
he
So
will. Yeah, he and his team, Lance and Nicole and is it Matthew in Canada?
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
I've never met him, but they are fantastic. But yeah,
Yeah.
watch out. If you if you don't like wearing yellow, don't talk to those people because they will make the case.
Yep. Yeah. The NPS score is very interesting. I think that, one of the big challenges park owners face today is the fact that, the hospitality section has gone up so much partially due to glamping and just bringing
Yeah,
in new people to the industry. It's not the same hospitality level I think you had 10 or 20 years ago. The expectation level is just so high. And then with depending on the park, how much staffing you have, that can really be a burden on some people. Is that something that you've noticed here in the last few years? Just that expectation level's gone up so much more, it requires
absolutely.
more? Yeah.
Absolutely. And part of that happened, part of it, I think you're right, is glamping. I think another big part of it happened during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So many new people came into the space as campers or glampers,
Yep.
taking into try what else can we do? We can go outside, right? We can camp. I can't tell you in 2020, I should have tracked it. The number of new people, the number of people pulling in and saying, not only is the RV brand new, we are brand new. We have never done this before. I'd see people getting out of their trucks like sweating bullets, like I've never towed something like this before and I am freaked out. Or we'd have families come in and you'd see them at the campsite later setting up the tent and they're tearing tags off everything because they
Yeah.
went to Walmart the week before, found a tent and a cooler and thought, this is it. We've got to do something. So this is what we're going to do. Um, and then during that time, as the demand increased, right, and the supply tightened, what did campground owners do? And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but they took their rates up. And as those rates go up, the rate is the first part of the perception of the experience they're going to get.
Yep. Yeah.
If I'm being charged $200 a night to stay in a safari tent someplace, right, as a glamping, or if I used to be able to camp for $50 a night on an electric water and sewer site, a full hookup site, and now it's 75. Okay, what else am I getting? I expect
Yeah.
this higher end experience. So yeah, I mean, definitely saw that, and still see it. And because of that, I will say that for a lot of clients that I have now, when I look at a P&L, I used to see, like owners would be able to get into like the maybe 40 or 50% um, OpEx range, right? Where their operating expenses were about 40 or 50% of their top
Yep.
line number. Now it's kind of the other way around. Their NOI might only be about 40% because all
Yeah.
of their costs have gone up along with, and you really can't, in a lot of cases, you can't chase those costs. You can do a little bit by raising your rates, right? But at the same time, right now, consumers are feeling so squeezed. How much can you take your rates up before you're rating people out?
Yeah.
So it's
Yep.
definitely there's been a change, and a lot of it is that pricing expectation, um, and what people think they're going to get for it. Like if I'm on some campsites at some parks, I'm getting close to maybe a cheap motel or even
Oh, yeah.
a Verbo or an Airbnb. Like why am I taking all this camping stuff out and setting up the site and do when we can just stay here, have a simpler stay and spend more of the money on the experience than on the lodging. And campgrounds have the opportunity to bridge that and offer both experience and lodging, but it's a tough rope to it's hard to navigate right now because
Well,
of
I
those
think
costs.
Yeah, and I think even not just the hotels, it's really Airbnb. I think that's really putting a lot of pressure on that too. I will say,
Some, yeah.
just from my own experience, traveling, we went to the Grand Canyon in 2020 and we stayed in Airbnbs. I know there's going to be people who just stop listening to the show now because I said that. But we stayed in Airbnbs and I will say, we got 3 days in a house pretty much for, $200-300, and, compared to some campsites and those really popular camping destinations, you might be renting a cabin for 1 day for that much.
Yep.
So I think that puts pressure on the park industry. I think what you mentioned, pricing people out, it's kind of interesting. Toby O'Rourke, the CEO of Campgrounds of America, at this last convention noted that the industry needs to get people camping more You know, a lot of people just camped once in 2025. Trying to get people to camp more in 2026. Well, what is the pricing? How does that impact that?
Yeah.
Maybe, if it's not as affordable to go camping, maybe you just camp once and then you spend the money to do some other type of experience. So that's definitely something I think the industry needs to keep focusing on. Um, I don't know what that looks like. There's obviously a lot of different factors that go into that. People have invested pretty heavily in their parks, so they
Yeah.
need some of that money to help afford those improvements probably. So,
Without a doubt. Yeah. And the goal is to just get your rates decompressed. If
yeah,
anybody's listening out there, find offerings that can sit into different rate bands than the ones you have now. They're
yeah.
maybe a little bit lower. There's call me. That's
I will say there are park owners I talk with too that will just put up a safari tent and just treat it as like a regular lodging unit, as like a primitive cabin. I'm like, I don't think, when people see a safari tent, I think they expect a higher level, whether
yeah,
you promote it or not. If I'm like booking a safari tent, I'm expecting a different experience than maybe
yeah.
I would get in like a primitive cabin. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but that's what I would assume other consumers think too. So,
That is the surest way to fail at glamping, what you just
yeah.
said right there. There's and I've seen it a lot. RV parks saw the great rates that people were getting early on
Yep.
from their glamping resorts, and they thought, well, all it takes is the tent. If you put that tent and surround it with RVs, it's they're gonna have a bad time, and that's not good for you. So
Yeah. No, especially when an RV kicks on their generator in the middle.
that's exactly it. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
But real quick, we do have to wrap up the show. We'll have to bring you back. I'm sure there's a lot more
I'd love
in that
to.
brain of yours that we could explore, including what your favorite bird is. But we'll save that for another episode. But just describe a little bit how people can get in contact with you for your Vireo and the types of services you provide again, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Ben. I
Yeah.
always enjoy our conversations.
Yep.
You can find me at growwithvireo.com. Um, and we, again, do everything from operational guidance. We can write SOPs, build you financial models and budgets, do due diligence for parks you're going to buy, help you prepare your park for a sale if you're selling it, full feasibility studies for building from raw land, market studies. Um, yeah, it's almost easier to just say, I don't do third party management, but if you've got another need, give me a ring.
And you could connect people with third-party management companies
I
probably,
can. Yep,
ones you have
absolutely.
experience with. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, have you and real quick before we wrap up, do you think you're gonna own a park down the road? Have you and your wife are you guys gonna open like a bird sanctuary slash campground?
So I've been looking,
You've
but
been
I don't think at this point it would have to be very special. It would have to be very close to home. We both have aging parents. She's got a great job with the state of Ohio, and she's got light at the end of her tunnel. I think
Okay.
it's at this point like another 11 years. That's really hard to give up at this point. So, and she loves her job. It's not just like something she has to sit and toil away at. So probably won't see me owning anything, but I never say never.
I've heard that owning an RV park campground is a very easy retirement plan.
It
So,
is. It's
that's
incredibly easy. Just
rumor.
ask my dad. He bought ours at when he was 55, and
Oh, yeah.
26 years later we sold it, and he was still not retired. His retirement plan was expiration. He was like, if I have a heart attack and fall off the golf cart, what could be better? I love being here. I was like, dude, that's so. Yes, if your retirement plan is expiration, go for it. I say
All
go
the
for it.
insurance people that listen to this just about had a heart attack when you said that. So, uh, well, thank you, Greg, for coming on the show, and thanks everyone for watching slash listening. And we will be back again down the road.
Thanks for having me, Ben.